Good evening, good afternoon, everybody.
Good morning too, as well.
Good morning where you are. So I think we're live. So it's my great pleasure to welcome everyone to the Silk Road Lit Fest this evening in Tashkent, and this session on the female poets of Fergana. My name is Denise Waddingham, and I'm the director of the British Council in Uzbekistan. As some of you may know, the British Council is the United Kingdom's cultural relations agency, working in the areas of arts, education, and promotion of the English language in over 100 countries worldwide. And our aim as a cultural relations organisation is to build trust and understanding between the people of the United Kingdom and other countries. And this project is a fantastic example of cultural relations and collaboration between Central Asia and the UK. And I'm excitedly holding up Andrew's book here, or the book that we're going to be talking about today. So Andrew Stanneland is an English poet who grew up in Sheffield and studied politics at Durham University. And for this book on Nodira and Uvaysiy, he worked with Nazila Elmi, a graduate student who grew up in Afghanistan and went to university in Turkey and Germany, and Idakon Bumatova, a translator and interpreter who grew up in Samarkand. So we have these amazing female poets coming from Central Asia in the 19th century, the end of the 18th century actually, who were known and successful in their own lifetimes, and two Central Asian female translators today, working with Andrew, and Nodira and Uvaysiy's poetry finally being made accessible to an English-speaking audience worldwide. So we're going to listen to Andrew's talk, and hopefully there should be some time at the end for you to ask some questions. I will attempt to moderate and ask questions on your behalf from the chat function. So if you do have a question, please type it into the question function, and we'll see what we have time for at the end. But for now, without further ado, I'm really delighted to introduce Andrew Stanneland. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. Thank you to everyone who has joined us. I'll start by telling you a bit about Nodira and Uvaysiy to give anyone who doesn't know them some historical context. So Nodira was born in 1792 in Andijan in the Fergana Valley. She was well educated and highly literate. She married Umar Khan, who was also a poet, and had two sons with him. In 1810, Umar Khan became the Khan of Kokand, overthrowing the previous Khan, his brother. He was very much a military ruler, but his court was also highly cultured and something of a literary salon. His reign was a short one, though, and he died in 1822. Their eldest son, Madali Khan, became the new Khan. He was only about 12, and Nodira may have done much of the ruling herself. We shouldn't overstate her power, though. Madali Khan often ignored his mother's advice. It happens. He exiled or executed anyone he didn't like or didn't trust, including his younger brother. That was exiled, not executed. And he was increasingly public in his dissolute behavior. In the end, he brought disaster on himself, Nodira, and Kokand. In 1842, the Emir of Bukhara invaded and executed Nodira and both her sons. Uvaysiy was a bit older than Nodira. She was born in 1779 in Margalan, also in the Fergana Valley. She was also well educated and as well versed in Persian and Turkic literature as Nodira was. She became an Otin, a female religious teacher, as well as a poet. Her husband also died young. After his death, Nodira and Umar Khan invited her to Kokand to live in the palace and teach their children. She was one of the leading figures in the literary life of the court and had a close relationship with Nodira, very good friends. After Nodira's death, Uvaysiy retired to Margalan until her own death in 1845. So that's Nodira and Uvaysiy in the background. And you've already seen the book. So here's the book that Denise showed you, the selected poems I've co-translated into English with Nazila and Aida. Nazila is Afghan Uzbek and is currently either living in Ankara or on a plane to New York. I'm not sure. Aida is Uzbek and lives in Tashkent. Aida joined near the end and did 8 poems with me. Nazila did the other 40. Aida knows these poets quite well, but for Nazila and myself, doing these translations was really a process of discovery, which I hope means we've brought a fresh perspective to them. For me, it was wonderful to discover 2 great poets with such strong characters, such strong voices, who I think translate really well and have a lot to say to people today. In the spring of this year, I visited Uvaysiy's house museum in Margalan. Apart from me, all the visitors were groups of schoolgirls. It was great to see Uvaysiy still teaching young women, still a figure of inspiration for them. And I'm really happy that a sisterhood came together to create this book, apart from me, of course, the honorary member. Nazila, Aida, Sophie, who took the cover photo, who has organised the festival, Naima, who did the illustrations, and other women who helped us in different ways. Anyway, on to the poems. Let's start with one by Uvaysiy. This is a chiston, a riddle, and I'm going to attempt to share my screen so you can see it. There we go. There is a dome, there is no door, no daylight, not a chink. And there are many women there, and they are all in pink. I open up the dome and ask the women how they are. They are all veiled, and an embrace, and there is blood to drink. The answer to the riddle is a pomegranate. But here is Uvaysiy denouncing the oppression of women in harems, like a Central Asian Margaret Atwood, while living in the Khan's palace and depending on his patronage. All of her poems that have survived are in Chagatai, which is the old Turkic language that modern Uzbek and Uyghur developed out of. Nodira wrote in Chagatai too, but she wrote the majority of her poems in Persian. One of the many great things about collaborating with Nazila was that she speaks Persian as well as Uzbek. Nodira's Persian poems seem to have been neglected, so it was great to be able to give them their due and translate them directly from the original Persian script. All the poems of hers I'm going to read today are Persian. And the only place to start is with a ghazal about how much she loved Umar Khan, her husband. Oh, spring, how sweet it is to see your sapling stature approaching me, my eyes astonished by that stature. Refinement and proportion and insouciance and handsomeness are subjects of a letter that concerns your stature. No one has seen a palm tree in the land of spring that is your equal, a cypress or a boxwood tree not stamped on by your stature. In any line that I am writing, there is something that is free from thinking of you, from imagining your stature. We have seen men as tall as cypresses, not one, amongst the whole world's bows to set against your stature. Although your absences all scorch me, I have hope too from anticipating your approaching stature. A dove says no to nesting in a cypress when it sees you in the garden spreading out like wings your well-proportioned stature. For many years, my moon-faced one, what I have worked for is that any month and any year will satisfy your stature, as long as in the garden of the universe it is this green. May your head be held high by your accomplished stature. Making a wish for that fidelity that is so fine. I set my eyes on seeing your auspicious stature. Macnuna, in the meadow of maturity, has equanimity from thinking of your stature. Macnuna is the pen name that Nodira uses for most of her Persian poems, and Nodira is actually a pen name as well, as is Uvaysiy. Anyway, let's go for another poem. This time it's another riddle. Another riddle by Uvaysiy. And it's the top one with the original on the left-hand side. A green man is what he is in midsummer on a tree. In winter he is naked and in public on a tray. A bird's bones in a shell is what we see. A bird, its bones still in a shell, is he? And the answer to that one is a walnut. And I think it shows Uvaisiy's precise eye for an image, a bird's bones in a shell, and her sense of humor too. And for her to make a joke about someone being naked in public is pleasingly disruptive to the standard image of a 19th century Central Asian woman. I spoke about Nodira and Makhan, these two poet rulers, as a sort of Victoria and Albert of Kokand. But Makhan married 3 other women as well, as was customary. Nazir had some strong views about this, and Nodira seems to have had strong views about it too. For the next ghazal and 2 others, only a Cyrillic text was available. Aida grew up in Samarkand, which is largely Tajik speaking, so she speaks Tajik as well as Uzbek, so she was able to do these for me. And there's the Cyrillic. Without you to enjoy this banquet with, the wine's waves are on fire. Without wine from your ruby lips, food is on fire and wine on fire. We scarcely meet. But my beloved doesn't care. It does no good to weep. Have mercy, oh my friends. My soul that is in ruins is on fire. The truth is, day and night, I am on fire without you. When I am awake, I am on fire, and when I am asleep, I am on fire. Sugar is bitter on my tongue, without the sweetness of your lips. That banquet now is far away. My candle melts and is on fire. I don't know how it came about, alas, I fell in love with you. I am like grass, that noble and that charming one has set on fire. Don't ask me, oh my dear, how much my heart is hurting now. Being bereft besmirches it, a candle in a lamp that is on fire. Macnuna, words of mourning are the only ones I have. My notes are stained by sorrow, and the body of my poems is on fire. Of course, abandonment by the beloved is a standard trope in the ghazal tradition, and there's a Sufi context to it as well. Personally, I find it quite tiresome when some privileged male poet writes of how being abandoned by some young person he is in love with. But when a woman in the early 19th century says it, it's serious. I try to avoid using jargon, but I believe this is what critical theory calls shit just got real. Anyway, Umar Khan died in 1822. It seems that heavy drinking and his military campaigns had weakened him, and he died after a short illness. He was about 35, and Nodira was 29. She wrote this ghazal after his death. Our garden's glory, it has been decreed, has shattered. That young branch, cut off, dropping in a brook, has shattered. Although in his strong hands a stone would smash like glass, like a stone smashes glass, it is he who has shattered. Although 100 wings of fortune shielded him, his fragile heart that death had weighed upon has shattered. Out of our nest of order, the Samurg has flown, the bank of the bazaar, the counting house has shattered. The image of my heart has gone like morning wind, and with Macnuna's sighs, the shining sky has shattered. And here's one of the illustrations that Naima did for us. There are no contemporary portraits of Nodira or Uvaysiy, although there are some Soviet-era paintings. So it was better to get a stylized representation. I think this really captures something really, really well. Right, I am going quicker than I thought, which is good because I am going to drop in a couple more poems. So this is Uvaysiy. So it was very much kind of narrative based so far from Nodira. There will be narrative from Uvaysiy later, but this is a ghazal by Uvaysiy about what she was devoted to. She was devoted to God. She was devoted to poetry, and anyway. To that round moon, O love, may my innermost being be devoted. To that upstanding flower, may my weeping also be devoted. So what, O people, if I don't lift up my forehead from the earth? This mirror makes me merry, to which all my thinking is devoted. May I be longing all my life for my beloved, and to that one's whims may the white chalice of my body be devoted. My vigil means my eyes do not know sleep. It is the dream that the Narcissus was enchanted by, to which I am devoted. One glance is balsam to my heart. One word is to my soul. One smile is to my tears. To my companions may I be devoted. Don't be dismayed to see me in a kirche, seeming crazy. To that noble raiment on you, O fine-bodied one, I am devoted. The art of poetry that is amongst your mysteries, to its succinct, affecting pearls of wit, may I, Uvaysiy, be devoted. And one more, and I'm dropping in, you don't know they're one more, but they're one more for me. After Umar Khan's death, Nodira wrote a lot of poems mourning his absence and missing him, and here's one of those. My picture of a rose, I wish that I would see him in a dream. my sugar breaker's lips. I wish that I would see him in a dream. I shut my eyes all day in pain without the silver shape of my companion. I wish that I would see him in a dream. The easy days are over, their long strings of joys. The will that is my body's and my soul's, I wish that I would see it in a dream. This heart of mine in agony is ripped to shreds, a wisp of hair with Khotan's scent. I wish that I would see it in a dream. My tall tree with a flower's face, with his narcissus eyes, my jasmine in the spring, I wish that I would see him in a dream. Oh, I will daub my breast with what it is to be bereft. His eye, adept at spells, I wish that I would see it in a dream. My soul is in my mouth from wanting to be one again. That fire that makes me scream, I wish that I would see it in a dream. The nightingale that I am naturally will forever cry. My garden facing me, I wish that I would see it in a dream. So far apart from my Amir, Nodira, my line breaker, there are mountains on my heart. I wish that I would see him in a dream. In the Soviet era, the way to make Nodira ideologically acceptable, despite being a queen, was to emphasize that she was a friend of the poor, that she had a strong sense of injustice, and that she was a loyal and dutiful wife. This emphasis seems to have continued in the independence era. It's a nice image to teach in schools. And I don't doubt that she was a dutiful wife, but I don't think she had much choice. And there's a lot more to her than this. I was surprised by how personal and how passionate her poems are. When she wrote about injustice and oppression, it was during the reign of her son, Madali Khan. It was her own son who was the oppressor. This is a poem directly about him. Unfortunately, only 3 couplets were available. It was very frustrating to find that there aren't published editions of either poet's complete works. Many of their poems are only in the original manuscripts. If you care about your national literature, the most basic thing is to make sure people can read it. Modern critical editions of the complete works of these 2 great poets should be a top priority for the literature department of any serious university. Anyway, here are the 3 couplets. Do you not know what that star transiting its time has done? Do you not know what the malign alignment of its time has done? Do you not know what that one, to that boundless scholar, what that scholar killer, ignoramus as he is, has done? Do you not know what that one, with his Hindu tricks, has conjured up? Do you not know what that ill-tempered and ill-natured one has done? Thanks, Mum. The Nodira loved her husband and was critical of her son. Uvaysiy was the opposite. She didn't like her husband and didn't write anything about him, not when he was alive, not after his death. And she doted on her son. This is a ghazal she wrote when her son was away in Madali Khan's army on a campaign to conquer Kashgar. Today, my friends, it is my child, my dear beloved child I miss. A beggar I may be, but it is that Shah of my time I miss. I am a stranger, an outsider, miserable and alone. I am in so much pain from this. It is my medicine I miss. The one my tongue does zikr on, my heart too. It is my good child, my dear one and my only one. That sultan of my state I miss. With one eye always on the road, all day, all night, I wait for him to come and ask me how I am. It is that visitor I miss. With no course set for me, may he for whom there is no cure come, he who calls me mother, whose embrace is red my blood, and whom I miss. The world that is before my eyes, seeing his absence, is benighted, enlightening my eyes, my heart. It is my bright, bright moon I miss. Uvaysiy weeps alone all night and all day. It is that one who, my Khan, brings beauty to my home and brightness to my eyes I miss. I will just say that in the book there's loads of notes, so things like zikra, which is meditation on the on God. Those are all explained. So I haven't been going through those while we've been reading them, but if you buy the book, they're all explained there. So that's Uvaysiy missing her son, and sadly he died during the campaign in battle. And I'm afraid it does all end badly, with Nodira mourning her husband, brooding on her son's misrule like an ancient Greek family tragedy, and Uvaysiy mourning her son. I'll finish for now with a ghazal by Uvaysiy, standing up to it all with her spirit still strong. And then we'll see how many questions there are, and I might drop in another one or two at the end if we've got time. So anyway, this is Uvaysiy telling us who she is. I am one who is overwhelmed by suffering, Uvaysiy, and anywhere it is, I am a friend of it, Uvaysiy. I haven't found the faithfulness I wanted from the world, so I have shut my eyes. I am assiduous, Uvaysiy. Let nothing in to tie your heart to it, so you can say to God all day and all night, I am unattached, Uvaysiy. The nights get no rest, no respite from me, my cries, my pleas, up to the skies, the stars from me, from struggling Uvaysiy. Say nothing, hermit, if you see me in a ruined inn, not one breath I do nothing with, obedient Uvaysiy. If anyone steps into misery, if it must be on someone's head, be it on mine, self-martyring Uvaysiy. Oh, Sufi, do not call me, oh, Sufi, do not do me wrong and call me careless Uvaysiy. Under this suffering is love. I am incurable, Uvaysiy. And that is an illustration of Nodira's grave in Kokand, which I visited in the spring. Denise, where are you?
Thank you. I am just coming in. That was beautiful, Andrew. Thank you so much. Now I can't find where to put my camera on, but oh yes, I can. There you go. Magical.
I can straight up answer Iftihar's question in the comments rather than the questions. So kind of black mark for that. First of all, Iftihar, I've no idea if that Iranian poet had any influence on them. I know that they were both very much immersed in the Persian tradition as well as the Turkish tradition. So it's possible, but I don't know who that poet is. So yeah, I'm not an expert. That's my overall answer to that question, but thank you for that.
Okay, we have some interesting questions coming in, and quite a few questions related to the translation process. And,
Yeah.
and I actually was going to ask you to say a bit more about how the three of you work together. But the first question has come in: how do you ensure that you keep the original meaning of the poetry? Because obviously poetry can be quite difficult for people to understand, you know, in their own language, even without translation. So it must be extremely hard to translate.
Yes, it is. It is. It is. It is. It's terribly hard. Terribly hard. How do you say? I mean, you just have to really, really do your best and just try to be as faithful and just be as open to it as possible, and try to keep your ego out of it as much as possible. Huge task, obviously. And the other thing is that it's hard to translate the meaning because the meaning isn't necessarily obvious. There may be different meanings, or you might not know. You know, the poet might not know, and they're not around to ask anyway. So that's all hard. And then in the end, you kind of have to make a decision. It's like you have to decide, well, I think it means that, or it means that or that, but I can only say one of them. So you have to make that decision. And from, you know, and it comes down to personal style as well. I mean, if someone else translates these, they'll be completely different. For me, the main thing to translate is some meaning. I'm not going to just translate something vague because there's kind of no point. So I'll try to find some meaning and to make that as clear as possible while being good poetry as well. And the collaboration is part of that as well, because then you've got feedback. It's very interesting for me doing these collaborations, because when you write a poem yourself, it's very hard to find someone who can give you kind of really detailed feedback. When you do this, instantly that the collaborator can do that because they know exactly what where you got your idea from, what the source is. So they can look at what you're doing and go, no, you got that wrong, mate. Or yes, but, or I'm not sure about that. And often go, yeah, well, if you think that, and I'd think, yeah, and I'd think, well, if they're not sure, I'm not sure. And I would go back and even though it was correct, there's a better way of doing it. So I think that actually the collaboration is really, really useful for that, for getting, you know, intimate feedback and banging things around and then getting them to tell me what it means, because I would do a literal translation and I would go through that and it didn't always make sense or it wasn't detailed or whatever. So between that kind of is how something comes out of it that I hope their voice comes across, and I hope it comes across faithfully.
And what about words that have multiple meanings, or words that were just not easily translated? I mean, was that like a group effort to solve?
Not really. That was kind of my decision. I mean, I would. Well, the note, you use the notes, so the notes can explain stuff if you need them. Then you can also keep things untranslated like zikra and explain them in the notes, or you translate. There's a word hijron, which is one of Nazila's favorite words, which means the sort of the agony of separation, and you can't do a kind of, well, you can't do the agony of separation. That's the whole line gone, because you know to say hijron, and bereft that's kind of pretty strong in English. So that was very close. But the hijron is a noun and bereft is an adjective. So then that got complicated. So if you could find a word that was good, otherwise, basically you have to do your best, and you're not expecting it to be perfect, or it's not the real thing. It's not the real thing, but it's a lot better than nothing. I've said this to these before. If you want to appreciate the paintings or the architecture or the music or the dance of Uzbekistan or anywhere, you can see them, you can hear them. It's a direct. But the literature, and especially the poetry, there's nothing unless a translation happens. So at least it's contributing something to that, I think.
Thanks. And so we have a really good question.
I'll just jump in on it as well. It was quite, rather than translating everything, was to keep as much of the culture as possible. So, for example, Mirab, some people would translate that as an altar, but it's not. It's really not. So you don't want to translate a kind of specific Muslim term into a sort of Christianish term. So that was another kind of factor of keeping the context. Yeah, sorry.
Thank you. No, we have a great question from Tony D, who said, would these ghazals have been recited or sung?
Yes, they would. They would. And that tradition, if you were a poet, don't ask me to sing any of the translations, by the way. Anyone puts that in the question box, just remove it. Yes, if you were a poet, you would recite and sing your poetry. And one thing to remember is that there were no printing presses in Central Asia until the end of the 19th century. So it's after their time. So there were printed books, but they were imported from India, so the Mughal emphasis in India or Persia, or whatever. But there were no printed books of theirs. So there were manuscript books, but obviously there are going to be very few of those. So they would be known predominantly by performance, and that would be in small gatherings, and then the poem would get handed on. And so, for example, Uvaysiy, as an Utin, as a Sufi teacher, her poetry, and one or two of Nodira's as well, would then be performed at women's religious gatherings and recited. So yes, absolutely, that very much is a performance tradition.
Thank you. So I had a question about how did you first get interested, Andrew, in Central Asia and the literature of Central Asia?
Complete accident. It's a terrible mistake that I would never recover from. No, I was writing about Georgia and Armenia and reading stuff about them, and I happened to read Gurdjieff's autobiography. He lived in Bukhara for a while. I thought, Bukhara, checked it out on Google, saw the photos, thought, whoa, that looks good. So I thought, well, I'd quite like to go there. So I didn't really start reading anything properly until autumn 2019, visited in beginning of 2020, just before COVID, very, very fortunately. So yeah, that's also why I couldn't answer Iftikhar's question very well, because I'm kind of new to all this, and hopefully that kind of enthusiasm is a positive thing as well as a negative kind of lack of knowledge. Yeah, and it's such a rich. I mean, Uzbekistan is a wonderful country in terms of what you see and everything, but it's such a rich mixture of Turkic and Persianate, and there's Buddhist and Greek and all kinds of stuff in the background, and the whole Muslim and Arabic thing. There's just so much richness there that there's just a lot to enjoy and to be inspired by. So
I mean, it's really incredible that you've already worked on 2 books in what seems to me like such a short space of time. I mean, I guess you really didn't have anything else to do during lockdown, right?
I'm going to say it tells you a lot about my life, about my social life. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, the certainly the previous book, which is a translation of Aisha Navoyi and Abdulhamid Chulpan, that was lockdown. This was a sort of bit post, but we're kind of still in that kind of mode. And yeah, kind of when you focus on it, it's you just kind of get on with it. Most of the time was kind of waiting for another one to do or whatever. And certainly after having done, so Navoyi is kind of the main man. Everything's named after him. Chulpan is the greatest modern Uzbek poet. After having done those, it was great to do women. Yeah. So that was like, oh yeah, that's the obvious one to do, and an absolute pleasure. And I do think they come across really, really well. And actually, well, I will jump in and answer this question I can see in front of me as to why do you think Uvaysiy and Nodira are not better known outside Central Asia? Is the fact they are women a contributing factor? And to answer the second bit, I'm sure it is. And I mean, most Central Asian poets are not better known outside Central Asia. So that's the first factor. I think with Nodira, there's a problem because she wrote partly in, I think it's about 600 poems that have survived, 350 roughly in Persian, 250 in Chagatai. And our translation actually matched that ratio almost exactly, completely by accident. So the Persian poems, it would be really easy for them to be well known outside Central Asia. There's, since the Iranian Revolution, there's a huge Persian-speaking diaspora around the world. There's loads of professors of Persian literature, courses in Persian literature, but that her Persian poems have been held back for some reason. Possibly because in Uzbekistan, they were so, after independence, they were so kind of focused on nation building and Uzbek identity that kind of fell by the wayside. So there was that. As to why her Chagatai poems and Uvaisiy's poems and others, I think you look at the previous presidents, the Karimov's Karimov period, when Uzbekistan was really, really close to the world. So you didn't have that engagement with universities, literary engagement. So stuff wasn't going out in the way it could have. So that's one thing. And it's just, it's not the only place that stuff doesn't travel. It's hard to, so there's a bit of imposter syndrome with me that, I don't speak languages. That's why I'm collaborating. But if someone writes something in French, it's very easy to find someone who's bilingual, English-French bilingual, complete, in both cultures, and can translate. It's very hard to find someone who can do that from even from Persian, but certainly from Chagatai. So that's another reason, you have to either you wait and hope that someone comes along who can do that, or this does seem like a good, at least an interim measure of doing it. The golden rule is you translate into your native language. To translate poetry, you have to be able to write poetry. So if I can contribute that and then collaborate with people in Tashkent or with Nodira, who was in Ankara at the time, then that does seem to be a way of doing that job, I think.
And getting the poetry out there. So I think that it's fantastic. I mean, it's a really important book for that reason. So we have another question in the questions about does the poetry you translate ever influence your own poetry?
Oh, thank you for that question. Who asked that question? Because that was I could have planted that question myself. Thank you. Yeah, that's a good opportunity for me to promote my latest collection. In fact, I'll get it. Right. Good. That wasn't long. Here we go. Yes, absolutely. As I said, it does inspire me. I find that particularly the Persianate, just the elegance. I mean, his Persian poetry is the greatest poetry in the world, quite arguably. I mean, I won't fight anyone, but quite possibly it is. And just that elegance and just everything is really what I aspire to in my own poetry. And when I did the translations of the 12 ghazals by Navoyi, that was kind of a way of discovering a way of translating ghazals, because ghazals don't translate automatically into English. In theory, what you should have a rhyme before the refrain, and that's very easy in Chagatai, Persian, whatever, because they have a bit like French. They're very open. You have tons and tons of rhymes to choose from, so you're really not limiting yourself. English is much, much more specific, and the kind of rhymes are louder. So if you try to do that in English, you really are going to come badly. For a start, you've no chance of really sticking to the accuracy of the meaning, and it's going to be kind of comic basically and strained and just not a good idea. So dropping that and just doing the refrain seemed to be a good way of matching, because the thing with the ghazal is it's not difficult. They wrote hundreds of them, Nodira wrote thousands of them. It's a bit like the sonnet in English or in Italian. It's a go-to form for people to it's just like this is how you express yourself. This is how you contemplate an idea. The ghazal is what you do. So that kind of usefulness, that fluency, this was a way of doing it. And having done that, I then thought, oh, well, maybe I could write a few myself. So in this collection in couplets, which is also available on Amazon, there is a sequence of 10 English ghazals of my own. There's also a couple of sequences. One of them are aphorisms from reading the Baburnama by Babur, and the other one is a sequence of aphorisms from reading Gulistan by Sadi. So yeah, absolutely feeding back in to my poetry. Thank you.
Great, and I think we are going to wrap up a few minutes before the hour because there'll be another session starting. But so another question then from me is, what's next, Andrew? I mean, do you have another project planned, and will it be with Central Asia again?
Yes, and yes. So I've got three things coming up. So 2 more translation projects that I'm kind of just kicking off. One of them is to translate 2 more 19th century women poets, Dilshad and Ambaruddin. Dilshad was a contemporary of Nodira's and crossed paths, or crossed swords even, with the Mokhan, and then Ambaruddin was her pupil. So having done Nodira and Uvaysiy, that kind of opens up these 2. And just there were a lot of women poets in the Fergana Valley in the 19th century, which is a great story. And both of these poets, my impression is that they're not as sublime as Nodira and Uvaysiy, but they've both got really great stories that are really worth telling. I think really interesting. And the second one to do, which I've already done one actually, is 3 Caracalpak poets. So if anyone doesn't know, Caracalpak is an autonomous region in the northwest of Uzbekistan. It's most known now for being where the Aral Sea was, unfortunately. So Caracalpak people, they have their own literature as well. And I am collaborating this time with a friend who is Caracalpak, thankfully. And we're going to do the 3 of their poets, 2 from the 19th century and 1 contemporary poet. And that's the great advantage of doing it this way. It means that I can switch languages. I don't have to go away for 20 years to study Caracalpak or Persian when I realized that Nodira had all these Persian poems. So that's a great kind of advantage of that. And we've done one, and I think they will translate very well as well. They're quite upfront about what happened to their people in the 19th century. And the third thing, final thing, is the translations of Navo'i. There were 12 ghazals, and Aida and I since then did 12 rubaiyat, 4-line poems. And there is an illustrated edition which will be coming out, or should be coming out, early next year, with miniature paintings by Devlet Toshev, who is a great contemporary miniature painter in Bukhara, and calligraphy, and hopefully it will be in the style of those manuscript books. So that's something very exciting for me to look forward to. And so that's coming up soon.
That's brilliant, and maybe we can be seeing the new book in a future edition of the Silk Road Lit Fest. So yeah, absolutely, we'll keep our fingers crossed for that. Well, Andrew, thank you so much. It's been a really fascinating talk today. Thank you to everyone who joined us. And yeah, good luck with all the future endeavours, Andrew, and I look forward to meeting you in person on your next visit to Uzbekistan.
Yeah, and thank you to everybody for listening. It is quite big because I can't see anybody or hear anything, but yeah. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Goodbye, everybody.